Black CEO removed from VIP seat for a white passenger. 5 minutes later, the entire staff is fired. The cabin was buzzing with the usual quiet shuffle of boarding. Bags stowed, jackets folded, passengers settling into their leather seats. But row 2 stood out. A flight attendant, Jessica, leaned in with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sir, I'm going to need you to move. This seat is reserved for one of our VIP Platinum members," she said, her voice laced with a tone that was less request and more command. In the wide, reclining chair sat Sekou Mensah. His boarding pass rested firmly on the armrest, his legs crossed as he typed with calm focus on his tablet. He looked up slowly, not flustered, not defensive, just steady. "I am a Platinum member," he replied, sliding the gleaming card from his wallet and holding it out. Jessica's smile tightened. She didn't even glance at the card for long before glancing over her shoulder. Standing in the aisle, waiting, was a woman who looked as if the world owed her the seat itself. Karen Wickfield. Blonde hair and a sleek chignon, pearls dangling at her ears, a diamond watch tapping impatiently against her wrist. Her eyes flicked to Sekou, then to Jessica. "I always sit there, that's my seat." She didn't shout, but her words carried like a stone skipping across water, sharp enough for nearby passengers to hear. Sekou's gaze didn't waver. He reached for his boarding pass and handed it to Jessica again. "Seat 2A, he said. Tone even. "Assigned to me." The air shifted as passengers leaned a little closer, some subtly lifting their phones. Fingers hovered above record buttons. A murmur of interest threaded through the rows. They weren't just witnessing a seating dispute. They were witnessing a clash of power, entitlement, and resistance. Jessica cleared her throat, trying to steady her voice. "This particular seat is usually given to our frequent Platinum travelers. Miss Wickfield is one of our most loyal." Loyalty. That was the word she chose. But the way she said it told the truth. Karen belonged. Sekou did not. Karen stepped closer, her handbag pressed to her side. She tilted her head with a smile that wasn't warm, but triumphant. "I always take 2A on this route. It's practically mine." Passengers exchanged glances. The tapping of her diamond watch grew louder in the heavy stillness. Sekou adjusted his tie and looked Jessica directly in the eye. His voice, steady and low, cut through the growing tension. "This is my assigned seat, and I'm staying in it." That simple refusal changed the air around them. Jessica shifted uneasily, her professional mask faltering. Karen let out a sharp laugh, exaggerated enough to echo down the aisle. "Oh, this is ridiculous," she announced, making sure everyone heard. Now the phones were fully lifted. Red recording lights blinked across the cabin. Words spread in whispers. "Is this really happening?" Jessica drew herself up. "Sir, I'll ask you again." Sekou interrupted with calm firmness. "You don't need to ask again. The answer will not change." For a long beat, no one spoke. Jessica's jaw flexed as she glanced back at Karen, whose smirk was practically dripping onto the carpet. Finally, Jessica pressed her lips together, straightened her uniform jacket, and walked briskly toward the front of the cabin. She disappeared behind the curtain. Karen stood in the aisle, one manicured finger tapping her watch like a ticking clock. Seconds stretched. Then the curtain shifted again. Jessica returned, but she wasn't alone. Trevor, the cabin supervisor, was walking beside her, his stride carrying the weight of authority. His eyes locked on Sekou, as though the passenger had committed a crime instead of sitting in the seat printed clearly on his boarding pass. "Sir," Trevor began, voice firm, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "we need you to vacate this seat immediately." Phones tilted higher. A collective hush fell across first class. Sekou closed his tablet, folded his hands, and looked up. "Why?" he asked simply. Trevor's expression hardened. "Because this seat belongs to our VIP passenger." He gestured toward Karen, who glowed with satisfaction. Sekou leaned back slightly, not breaking eye contact. His words came slowly, deliberate, unshaken. "This seat is mine." For the first time, Trevor faltered. The lines around his mouth deepened. His jaw tightened. Passengers shifted in their seats, sensing that the confrontation was only beginning, and about to escalate into something none of them could ignore. Quick pause for you watching. If you're hooked already, don't forget to like this video right now. It really helps. And tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Also, if you haven't yet, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Trevor adjusted his tie, his eyes narrowing. The quiet shuffle of the cabin stilled completely. "This is your last chance," he said, his voice rising just enough for row 3 to hear. "Stand up and move, or we'll have to take action." Passengers held their breath. Phones captured every twitch, every word. Karen's smile spread like she'd already won. Sekou didn't blink. He didn't move. His answer was short, final, and enough to freeze every ear that caught it. "I'm not moving." The line had been drawn, and as Trevor stepped back, signaling toward the front once more, the entire cabin knew something far bigger than a seat change was about to unfold. Trevor's shadow stretched across row 2 as he planted himself in the aisle, posture stiff, eyes locked on Sekou like a man accustomed to being obeyed. Passengers shifted in their seats, some raising their phones higher, others pretending to glance casually while recording everything. "Sir," Trevor repeated, his voice carrying the weight of command, "I'm not asking again. Stand up and move to another section." Sekou rested his hands calmly on the armrest, his composure unshaken. "You've seen my boarding pass, you've seen my platinum status. This seat was assigned to me." His tone wasn't angry, it was steady, even, the kind that left no room for debate. Karen's heels clicked softly as she stepped closer, arms folded across her expensive blouse. She glanced around theatrically, as if performing for an audience. "I told you, I always sit here," she muttered loud enough for row 3 to catch every syllable. Her lips curled into something between a pout and a smirk. "This delay is embarrassing." A nervous energy spread through the cabin. Trevor leaned down, his voice dropping to a sharp edge. "If you refuse to comply, we will escalate this. Is that what you want?" Sekou didn't flinch. "What I want," he said, his eyes narrowing just slightly, "is to sit in the seat I paid for." That refusal, delivered with quiet certainty, rattled Trevor. His jaw tightened and he straightened his tie again as though pulling dignity back into place. He turned his head toward Jessica, who had returned and was lingering near the galley curtain. Her hand was clenched around the edge of her tray, her eyes darting nervously between Trevor and Karen. And then it happened. As Karen bent down to adjust her bag in the overhead bin, her hand slipped casually into her clutch. She withdrew a small stack of folded bills and pressed them discreetly into Jessica's palm. The exchange was subtle, practiced, but not subtle enough. At least 3 phones angled to capture the motion, the flicker of green currency against a navy uniform. One passenger near the aisle let out a quiet, incredulous laugh, whispering to the man beside her, "She's actually bribing her." Jessica's cheeks flushed, but she tucked the bills into her pocket and straightened, pretending not to notice the watching eyes. Karen whispered, just loud enough for those closest to hear, "I appreciate you making sure things go the right way." Gasps spread softly through the rows like a ripple. People leaned toward each other, murmuring, thumbs tapping screens. Already, the internet was filling with clips, tweets, captions boiling with anger. Sekou remained silent, watching the exchange with the calm of a man who had seen this game before. He didn't need to say a word. His refusal was already louder than anything Karen or Trevor could throw at him. Trevor, emboldened by Karen's money and her presence, leaned in again. His voice sharpened. "We can do this the easy way, or we can call security and have you removed." The words landed like a sudden crack. Several passengers inhaled sharply, one woman covering her mouth. Another whispered, "Removed? For sitting in his own seat?" Sekou's voice, steady and deep, sliced through the thick air. "I will not move. This is my assigned seat." The defiance wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. Calm authority carried more weight than any raised voice could. Trevor's face flushed red. He stepped back, shooting a glance toward the cockpit curtain. A signal. Within seconds, the curtain shifted and the captain himself appeared. Captain James Reynolds, tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform immaculate, strode into the aisle with the kind of presence that usually ended arguments before they began. He stopped at row 2, his expression unreadable. Passengers leaned forward, waiting to see which way he would turn. "Mr. Mensah," the captain began, his voice measured, practiced. "I've been informed of the situation. My crew has the authority to make seating adjustments as needed. I need you to move." Sekou's gaze met his, calm, resolute. "With all due respect, Captain, this is my assigned seat. I chose it for a reason, and my boarding pass confirms it." Karen cut in, dramatic as ever. "This is absurd. I've flown this route for years, and I've always had 2A. I cannot believe I'm being treated this way." She raised her voice deliberately, ensuring every camera caught her outrage. Reynolds adjusted his cap, his lips thinning. "Sir, this is your final warning." His tone dropped lower, signaling the edge of enforcement. "Move, or we will call security." Phones caught every word, every shift of expression. Gasps filled the cabin once more, and a low murmur of disbelief ran through the rows. Sekou exhaled slowly, leaning back into his seat, shoulders squared. His words came crisp, unyielding. "I am not moving." Reynolds glanced toward Trevor, who gave a short nod. Jessica avoided eye contact, but her hand brushed nervously at the pocket where Karen's money sat. The captain turned toward the front, voice rising just enough for all of first class to hear. "Call security." Passengers froze. For a heartbeat, the cabin was silent except for the clicking of recording phones. And then the curtain shifted again, this time with a new weight. 2 uniformed officers stepped onto the plane, their footsteps carrying the threat of forced removal. The curtain swayed, and the hush inside first class deepened as 2 uniformed officers stepped into the cabin. Their presence was enough to still even the faintest whispers. Every eye followed them down the aisle. Phones tilted upward, tiny red dots blinking like unblinking witnesses. Trevor straightened, his chest puffed as though the reinforcements had arrived to secure his victory. Jessica stood behind him, lips pressed into a thin line, one hand brushing the pocket where Karen's bills still rested. Karen, meanwhile, leaned casually against the seat divider, her posture radiating smug relief. The first officer stopped at row 2. "Sir," he began, voice low but carrying, "we've been called to escort you from the aircraft." Sekou lifted his head, eyes sharp, steady. "Escort me for what? Tell me which policy I've broken." His voice wasn't raised, but the calm certainty in it forced everyone nearby to hold their breath. The officer's gaze flicked toward Trevor, then back to Sekou. "We were informed that you're refusing crew instructions." "Refusing unlawful instructions," Sekou corrected smoothly. He lifted his boarding pass once again, the black and gold platinum logo glinting under the cabin light. "Assigned seat, verified status, paid in full. Explain to me, what rule have I violated?" The officer hesitated. His jaw worked as if searching for words that weren't there. He glanced toward his partner, who shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet Sekou's gaze. The silence stretched. Then, from the back of first class, a woman's voice cut in. "He hasn't broken any rules. I've been recording this whole time." A phone lifted higher, the screen glowing with a live feed. Passengers stirred, emboldened. Another voice followed. "Yeah, same here. He's done nothing wrong." The officers stiffened. Still, they pressed forward, clinging to their orders. "Sir, please gather your belongings." Sekou's hand remained on the armrest. His eyes, unwavering, moved from one officer to the other. "You realize you're enforcing discrimination, don't you?" The words hung in the air like a gavel dropping in court. Gasps followed. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically, loud enough for her scoff to be heard across the cabin. "Oh, come on. This is ridiculous. We don't have all day." Jessica flinched at the sound, but said nothing. Sekou looked down briefly, sliding his tablet into his leather case. He gathered his notes, pages filled with outlines for the keynote speech he was scheduled to deliver that evening. He zipped the case, rose slowly, and adjusted his jacket. Every movement was deliberate, graceful, controlled. If they were going to force him out, it would not be as a man dragged or humiliated. It would be as a man standing tall, refusing to shrink. The officers flanked him, guiding him down the aisle. Phones followed, recording every step. From behind, someone muttered, "This is wrong." Another whispered, "They're going to regret this." But amid the low tide of voices came one sharp, cutting sound, the laugh of Karen Wickfield. She lowered herself into seat 2A with the ease of royalty returning to her throne. Jessica appeared at her side almost instantly, offering a glass of champagne with forced brightness. "I do apologize for the disruption, Miss Wickfield. Please enjoy the rest of your flight." Karen accepted the glass, tilting it slightly in mock salute as Sekou walked past. "Finally," she said under her breath, her smile as sharp as glass. Passengers recoiled at the display. Some shook their heads, others typed furiously into their phones. The glow of screens captured Karen's smirk, Jessica's discomfort, Trevor's self-satisfaction, and above all, Sekou's unbroken dignity. He walked steadily, flanked by the officers, each step echoing louder than the last. His head was high, shoulders square, the picture of composure in the face of insult. As he reached the exit, one officer hesitated. His voice dropped low, almost apologetic. "Sir, off the record. I'm sorry, I don't agree with this." Siku gave the faintest nod, his expression unreadable. "Then perhaps you'll remember this moment," he replied quietly. The officer looked away. The cabin door opened. Siku stepped through, the curtain falling closed behind him with finality. Out of sight of the passengers, he exhaled once, pulling his phone from his jacket pocket. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, the glow illuminating his steady features. He opened a secure chat, typed a single message, and hit send. "They picked the wrong person." The message flashed on the screen, sent to Elise, his COO. Back in seat 2A, Karen raised her champagne flute, savoring her hollow victory. What she didn't know was that with one quiet text, Siku had already set into motion a response that would shake the entire airline. Outside the terminal, Siku stood with his leather case balanced neatly at his side, the quiet text still glowing on his phone. Cameras were rolling, strangers whispering, social media already alive with fragments of what had just unfolded. Yet Siku's expression didn't betray anger. His calm was not weakness. It was the strength of someone forged in fire long before this flight. Siku Mensah had lived with the weight of being underestimated since boyhood. His parents had come to the United States from Ghana with little more than grit and hope. South Chicago was not a place that gave much freely. His father worked double shifts at the steel mill. His mother took on cleaning jobs in homes that looked like another world compared to their modest apartment. As a child, Siku learned quickly that survival wasn't enough. He needed excellence to be seen, let alone respected. While other boys raced down cracked sidewalks with basketballs under their arms, Siku stayed inside, huddled over a second-hand computer salvaged from a church basement. At 11 years old, he was already writing code, teaching himself from borrowed library books and sheer persistence. He didn't just play video games. He tore them apart and built them again, line by line. By his teens, he had designed rudimentary programs that could recognize patterns and predict outcomes, skills that would later define his empire. Then, when he was 16, tragedy carved a scar into his life. His father never came home one night. A violent robbery ended with a phone call that left Siku numb, standing at the edge of a grave far too early. He remembered the dirt under his shoes, the pastor's voice fading, and his mother's hand trembling in his. At that graveside, Siku made a promise to himself and to the man who had sacrificed everything for him. "I will build something that makes people see us as human first. I will fight every system that dares to erase our dignity." That vow became the compass of his life. Through college nights fueled by cheap coffee, through years of working odd jobs to cover rent, through rejection after rejection from investors who couldn't see past the color of his skin, Siku kept coding. He built program after program until one breakthrough finally caught fire. He launched Mensah Technologies from a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a desk made from stacked milk crates. The mission was simple but radical. Technology that stripped away bias from customer service, forcing companies to treat every client with the same dignity, no matter their name, accent, or background. 2 decades later, that company had grown into a global powerhouse worth over $2.8 billion. Corporations that once ignored him now begged for his systems. Governments and Fortune 500 companies licensed his software to train their teams and audit their treatment of customers. And yet, on this flight, surrounded by leather seats and sparkling glasses of champagne, Siku Mensah had been reduced to nothing more than an inconvenience. Dismissed, bribed against, and escorted off for no other reason than the shade of his skin. The cruel irony, the very airline that had just humiliated him, Skylux Airways, was in the middle of desperate negotiations with Mensah Technologies. Their outdated booking systems, inconsistent customer service, and plummeting satisfaction scores had pushed them into panic. They needed Siku's company to overhaul their operations. Without it, their market position was already crumbling. Board members had pinned their hopes on closing a $4.2 billion contract with Mensah Technologies. Investors whispered of a turnaround. Analysts predicted salvation. Skylux had staked its future on his software. And now, The man they had shoved out of seat 2A with police escorts was the very man who held the pen that could sign or sink the deal. Sekou knew it. Every passenger who recorded the incident knew it. By the end of the day, the entire world would know it. He stood outside the gate, phone still in hand, scrolling through messages from strangers who had already uploaded videos of the bribe, the supervisor's threats, and Karen Wickfield sliding smugly into his seat. Hashtags were climbing by the minute. Screenshots of Jessica pocketing folded bills were spreading faster than champagne bubbles in the lounge. His COO, Elise, had already replied, "Understood. I'm pulling legal and PR now. Where should we meet?" Sekou typed one word back, "War room." He slipped his phone into his pocket, his mind already shifting into battle mode. Years of discipline, years of carrying himself with dignity in the face of insult had led to this moment. This wasn't just about one seat on one flight. It was about the message the airline had sent to every black passenger who had ever been told they didn't belong, no matter how high they had climbed. This wasn't going to be forgotten, and Skylux Airways was about to learn the cost of disrespect. Sekou adjusted his cufflinks, his stride steady as he left the gate. His driver was already waiting outside, door open, engine running. He settled into the back seat, pulled out his phone again, and began dictating. Legal, PR, corporate strategy, everyone in the office within the hour, full documentation of incident already secured, were moving immediately. His voice was calm, but each word was a blade. Sekou hadn't even made it to the private lounge before footsteps caught up with him. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, clutched a carry-on in one hand and her phone in the other. Her face was flushed, her voice carrying both nerves and urgency. "Excuse me, sir, Mr. Mensah?" she asked, stepping into his path. "I was across the aisle. I recorded everything. From when Jessica first told you to move, to when they dragged you out." She swallowed, holding her phone out like an offering. The screen lit up with crystal-clear footage. Jessica's tight smile, Karen's folded bills pressed into her palm, Trevor's threats, and Sekou's calm refusal. Every second was captured. Sekou met her eyes. "What's your name?" "Naomi," she answered, her hand trembling slightly. "You shouldn't have to fight this alone. People need to see what happened." Sekou nodded once, the faintest flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Naomi. Send me the full file. I'll make sure it doesn't disappear." As she fumbled to share the video, others began to gather. A man in a navy suit tapped Sekou's shoulder. "I recorded too. Got a different angle. Clear shot of her paying the flight attendant." He handed over his business card. Another passenger approached with his phone out. "Mine's uploading already. You can use it." Within minutes, Sekou's inbox was filling with attachments. Angles from row 3, row 4, even economy passengers who had stood in the aisle to catch the scene. Each clip confirmed the same story. A black man, lawfully seated, removed to satisfy a white woman's entitlement. By the time Sekou sat down in the lounge, his name was already trending. Hashtags were climbing fast. Seat 2A, flying while black, justice for Mensah. Tweets surged across the platform. He showed his boarding pass. He was platinum. They still kicked him out, flying while black. Money exchanged hands on camera. The airline's done. Seat 2A. Watching a billionaire get treated like this makes you wonder, what chance do the rest of us have? Clips from Naomi's phone were going viral within minutes. One post had already hit 2 million views before Sekou's tea cooled on the table in front of him. Meanwhile, inside Skylux headquarters, the panic was immediate. Their PR team huddled in a conference room, screens glowing with angry feeds. A junior analyst stammered as he read aloud from his laptop. "It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. They've got footage of the money changing hands, the supervisor's threats, everything." The head of PR slammed her palm on the table. "Issue a holding statement now. Something about valuing diversity and investigating." "It won't hold," another executive muttered, tugging at his collar. "The man they dragged off isn't just some passenger. He's the CEO they've been trying to sign for the tech contract." The room fell silent. Every face turned toward the realization. Skylux's entire survival strategy, worth billions, was collapsing in real time, broadcast to millions of viewers. Back in the lounge, Sekou scrolled through message after message. Some came from strangers who had seen the clips online. Others were from respected voices, civil rights leaders, journalists, public figures, each one amplifying his story. Your calm was inspiring. We've all been there in our own ways. You gave us a voice. They'll regret touching you. For Sekou, this wasn't about ego. It was about proof. Proof that no matter how high you climbed, some still thought dignity could be taken from you with a smirk and a bribe. His phone buzzed again, an email from legal. Subject line, draft injunction ready. He opened it, skimming the lines. The lawyers weren't wasting time. They were preparing to hit Skylux with a discrimination suit before the day was out. Every passenger video, every whispered remark caught on camera, every angle of Karen's smug champagne toast would be evidence. Then another notification popped up, this time from Elise, his COO. A screenshot of a financial dashboard. Skylux's stock chart was dipping hard, red lines cutting down like falling glass. Attached was a short message. The market already knows. This is just the beginning. Sekou leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, eyes narrowing at the screen. He had faced prejudice before, but never with this much power behind him. The airline thought they had embarrassed him. In reality, they had just handed him the strongest weapon possible, truth, witnessed by dozens, broadcast by millions. He set his tea down untouched, opened a secure call line, and spoke clearly. Legal, accelerate the filing. PR, prepare the statement. Finance, monitor Skylux's drop by the hour. We move today. And as he ended the call, one thought remained steady in his mind. They had forced him out of a seat. But now, he would take away far more than a seat. He would take away their future. The executive floor of Skylux Airways had never been so tense. Phones rang in a chorus, monitors flashed with news updates, and the muted glow of stock tickers painted the room in streaks of red. A war room had been set up hastily, coffee cups half empty, stacks of paper scattered across the long table. Every executive in the company who mattered was present, but not one of them looked in control. On the central screen, a live feed of social media scrolled in real time. Videos from passengers inside first class were being shared faster than the PR team could count. Jessica's pocket swallowing Karen's folded bills. Trevor's sneer as he leaned down over Sekou. Captain Reynolds' warning that security would be called. And then the officers escorting a man out who had done nothing more than sit where his boarding pass told him to. Trending #1 globally, a junior analyst stammered, his voice shaking as he read from his tablet. Hack, C2A, flying while black. Over 15 million views in the last 2 hours. It's everywhere. The head of PR pinched the bridge of her nose. Craft a statement, now. Something about valuing diversity, zero tolerance for misconduct, internal review. Don't bother, another executive cut in, his tone sharp. The optics are clear. They're calling it racism and the footage makes it undeniable. We can't spin this. Someone else muttered from the corner. Did they seriously just take cash from her? On camera? The words weren't meant to be loud, but they carried, hanging in the air like a guilty verdict. A silence followed. Everyone knew the answer. Yes, they had, and the internet wasn't forgiving. Karen Wickfield's name was now trending alongside the airlines, screens filled with screenshots of her smug expression as she slid into seat 2A, champagne flute raised in mock victory. Tabloid blogs were already plastering her face beside headlines, entitled Heiress Bribes Flight Crew, privilege on display at 30,000 feet. Even her own ventures weren't safe. A cosmetics brand she had endorsed announced publicly they were reviewing their partnership. Comment sections burned with outrage. This is what money and whiteness buys you, someone else's seat. Back in the boardroom, the CFO spoke up, his voice tight. Shareholders are calling. They want answers. Some are threatening to pull their investments. Our stock is down 8% already. The CEO of Skylux, a silver-haired man who had built his career on projecting calm, slammed his hand on the table. Do you all understand what's happening? This isn't just a PR disaster. That man, Mensa, he's the CEO of the very company we've been courting for our systems contract. Heads turned. Shock rippled across the room. Wait, that was him? The head of operations asked, incredulous. Yes, the CEO snapped. Mensa Technologies, $4.2 billion on the table. And now, he won't just walk away, he'll bury us. You think any other tech provider will touch us after this? The room sank into silence again, the weight of the mistake pressing down like stone. Some executives stared at the footage looping on the big screen, watching the bribe play over and over, each time worse than the last. Others simply stared at their hands, unable to meet anyone's eye. One whispered, almost to herself, "How do you explain removing a man who followed every rule? How do you explain choosing a bribe over fairness?" No one answered, because there was no answer. Meanwhile, outside their walls, the outrage was accelerating. Civil rights groups were issuing statements by the hour. Lawmakers had begun calling for inquiries into airline discrimination practices. News anchors replayed the video on loop, voices sharp with condemnation. Back in the lounge, Seku's team worked in quiet efficiency. His lawyers drafted, his PR officers prepped, his COO handled the flood of messages from allies and partners. Through it all, Seku remained composed, fingers gliding across his phone as he read the storm gathering online. Finally, he opened his camera. No background crew, no fancy lighting, just his steady face, calm but resolute, filling the frame. He pressed record. "I was removed from a Skylux Airways flight today while sitting in my assigned seat," he began, his tone even, every word deliberate. "I showed my boarding pass, I showed my platinum status, I followed every rule, yet I was told my place did not belong to me." He paused, letting the silence do the work. "I want to make one thing clear. Dignity isn't negotiable. Not mine, not yours, not anyone's. No one should be forced out of their seat to satisfy someone else's sense of entitlement. Not in 2025. Not ever." He ended the recording with a final line. "This isn't just my story, it's our story. And it's time companies were held accountable." His finger hovered a moment, then tapped post. Within minutes, the video began spreading. It wasn't fiery or emotional. It was calm, measured, unshakable. The kind of calm that made injustice impossible to ignore. And in the Skylux boardroom, a new notification flashed on the central screen. Seku Mensah has posted a video. Executives stared at one another, realizing the damage had only just begun. The sun was setting outside the glass walls of Mensah Technologies headquarters when Seku walked into the war room his team had assembled. Lawyers, PR advisors, and senior executives were already seated, laptops open, screens filled with evidence pouring in from every angle. The atmosphere was tense but electric. Everyone knew this wasn't just a legal response. It was a moment that would define the company's legacy. His lead counsel, a tall woman with decades of courtroom experience, wasted no time. "We've got enough to file a discrimination suit within hours. Multiple passenger recordings, the exchange of cash, direct threats from staff. It's textbook." Seku nodded. "Draft it, file it, and make sure the damages are set high. They didn't just remove me, they removed every black traveler who's ever been told they don't belong." The lawyer's pen scratched quickly across her notes. "We'll peg the claim at a multi-million-dollar figure. It'll sting." Beside her, the PR director added, "Your video is climbing past 30 million views. Civil rights groups are reaching out. Lawmakers want to talk. This isn't just trending, it's the headline everywhere." Seku took it in silently, then walked to the head of the table where a single phone rested. The number programmed into speed dial was not one he had ever intended to use this way. But now it would matter more than any contract meeting. He pressed the button. 3 rings. Then a voice, polished and professional. "Chairman Howard speaking." "Howard," Seku began, voice steady, each word weighted. "It's Seku Mensah." There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that told its own story. "Seku, I assume this is about the incident." "This is about the deal," Seku replied, his tone like iron. "You've been pushing hard for us to finalize the $4.2 billion systems contract. That deal is no longer on the table." The silence that followed stretched long enough for the entire room to hear. Finally, Howard's voice returned, brittle at the edges. "You're making a mistake. Skylux needs your technology, yes, but walking away? It'll hurt your company too." Seiko's jaw tightened. "My company doesn't bleed from standing for what's right. Yours does." Another long silence. Then a sigh heavy with the weight of panic. "Seku, at least let us..." The call ended before he could finish. Seku set the phone down gently, as though it hadn't just detonated the airline's last chance at survival. Around the table, his executives exchanged glances. They had seen him negotiate billion-dollar partnerships with the calm of a surgeon. But this wasn't a negotiation. This was a reckoning. "Release the statement," Seku ordered. "Make it clear we will not work with companies that degrade human dignity." Our lawsuit will speak for itself. Emails shot out within minutes. News outlets picked them up within the hour. The headlines screamed across screens. Mensa Technologies pulls out of Skylux contract discrimination lawsuit filed against Airline Seat 2A incident, costs carrier billions. At Skylux headquarters, the fallout was instant. Shareholders erupted on emergency calls, demanding explanations. The PR team's inbox overflowed with messages from reporters. Every unanswered question only deepened the outrage. And then, as if the chaos needed fuel, an anonymous message hit the inboxes of several journalists. An internal Skylux memo, marked confidential. The memo revealed what the board had been debating behind closed doors: mass firings. Entire crews, supervisors, even senior executives were being discussed for termination. The airline's leadership was fractured, each faction blaming the other for the collapse. Some demanded Jessica, Trevor, and Reynolds be cut immediately. Others argued Karen's influence had driven the disaster, and they were paying the price for protecting her. The leak hit the press within minutes. Screens across the world lit up with headlines: Skylux considers purge after flying while black scandal. Inside Mensa Technologies, Sekou read the news alert without flinching. This was exactly what he expected. But he wasn't finished. Because this wasn't only about bringing an airline to its knees. It was about sending a message to every boardroom, every executive, every gate agent who thought power meant permission to discriminate. And that message had only just begun. The conference room at Skylux headquarters was silent, except for the whirring of a projector. 3 figures sat on one side of the long mahogany table: Jessica in her pressed Navy uniform, Trevor in his supervisor's jacket, and Captain Reynolds, with his cap set carefully in front of him. Across from them, a panel of HR executives, lawyers, and board members studied the grainy freeze frame of a video paused mid-play. The image was damning. Karen Wickfield's hand slipped into her designer clutch, then discreetly pressed folded bills into Jessica's palm. The cabin lighting captured every detail. Phones had caught it from multiple angles, each one sharper than the last. "Play it again," one of the board members instructed. The footage rolled. Karen's voice, smug and deliberate, whispered, "I appreciate your help with this situation." Jessica's face tightened as she pocketed the cash. Jessica shifted in her seat now, cheeks flushing. It wasn't what it looks like," she stammered. She's a regular. I didn't want to cause a scene." "You caused a scene," another board member cut in, his voice cold. "The whole world saw it, and worse, they saw you accept money for it." Trevor cleared his throat, trying to project authority even here. With respect, the passenger was being uncooperative. We had to manage the situation in real time. "Uncooperative?" one of the HR directors snapped. He was sitting in the seat assigned to him, a platinum member, verified. "The only disturbance came from you and your crew." Trevor's jaw worked, but no words followed. Then the video rolled again, this time to Trevor's own words. "We accommodate worthy customers who have specific preferences." The boardroom air grew heavier. Several executives exchanged disgusted looks, the phrase echoing like poison. "Worthy customers," a lawyer repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. "Do you understand what that sounds like? Do you understand what it means in the context of a black passenger being forced out of his seat?" Trevor lowered his gaze. The footage continued, showing Captain Reynolds entering the cabin, his measured tone escalating into threats. "This is your final warning. Move to another seat or we'll call security." The playback stopped. Silence filled the room. Reynolds leaned forward, trying to salvage authority. "In situations like these, I have to support my crew. Unity in the cockpit matters. If I had undermined them..." "You undermined this entire airline," the COO cut him off sharply. "Your so-called unity just cost us billions." Jessica's lip trembled as she tried again. "I didn't want to lose Karen's loyalty. She's flown with us for years. And her loyalty," the board chair said flatly, "has now destroyed yours." On the screen, a split view appeared. Karen sipping champagne in seat 2A, smirking as Sekou was escorted out. Her toast had been captured on at least 5 phones. The soundbite, finally, was looping across TikTok like a drumbeat of privilege. The HR lead spoke firmly, closing a folder of documents. "Effective immediately, Jessica Miller, Trevor Harris, and Captain James Reynolds are suspended pending termination review. Given the magnitude of this scandal, there will be no return to duty." Jessica gasped audibly. Trevor opened his mouth, then shut it. the weight of inevitability pressing down on him. Reynolds simply stared at his cap, shoulders slumping for the first time in his decorated career. But it wasn't just them. Karen Wickfield's name flashed on the screen again. Reports showed sponsors dropping her, brands cutting ties, and thousands flooding her company's customer service lines demanding accountability. Screenshots of her bribe had been plastered across front pages, from the New York Times to international tabloids. Her wealth had bought her a seat, but it had also bought her infamy. "She is not Skylux's staff," one executive muttered. "But her fingerprints are all over this." Another board member spoke bitterly. "She'll walk away bruised. We may not." The COO clicked to the final slide, a graph of stock value diving sharply. "We're at 12% down and falling. Shareholder revolt is imminent. We need to act." Everyone around the table knew what act meant. This wasn't just about firing staff. This was about salvaging a company dangling over the edge. One of the lawyers closed his laptop with a decisive snap. "We can't hide anymore. The world is demanding accountability. The public statement must be drafted and delivered before the markets open tomorrow." The CEO of Skylux, who had sat silently until now, leaned forward with grim finality. His voice carried the weight of inevitability. "Then it's decided. We face them, and we pray it's enough." Outside the boardroom, whispers ran like wildfire through the corporate halls. Employees gathered in corners, phones in hand, replaying the footage of Jessica pocketing bills, Trevor sneering about worthy customers, Reynolds issuing his final warning. One voice cut through the murmur. "Did they really think no one would notice?" Another replied bitterly, "They noticed, and now everyone has." Inside the boardroom, the executives began drafting. Each word of the public statement felt like sand slipping through desperate fingers. They knew no apology could erase the footage already burned into millions of screens. The projector dimmed, the room falling into shadows, and on every face one thought lingered. This wasn't just a scandal. This was survival. The day the statement dropped, Skylux Airways' logo was plastered across every news channel in the world. Anchors leaned forward, voices solemn, as the airline announced sweeping organizational changes. The statement was blunt. Jessica Miller, Trevor Harris, and Captain James Reynolds terminated. Several executives who had approved the crew's actions terminated. The board promised a systemic review of internal culture and training practices, pledging reforms designed to eliminate bias at every level. But the apologies rang hollow. Everyone knew the firings were not born of conscience. They were born of fear. Fear of lawsuits, fear of market collapse, fear of the passengers whose cameras had told the story no spin could bury. Sekou watched the announcement from his office window, the city skyline stretching endlessly behind him. His face was unreadable, but inside, a quiet resolve tightened in his chest. This was never about one seat. It was about the truth that racism, left unchecked, corrodes even the most polished facades. Reporters rushed to capture every consequence. Shareholders cheered the firings but dumped stock anyway, sending Skylux tumbling deeper. Business schools around the country announced they would use the Seat 2A incident as a case study in racial profiling and corporate mismanagement. Clips of Trevor's words, "worthy customers," became shorthand for discrimination in PowerPoint slides and lecture halls. But Sekou wasn't interested in just punishment. He wanted transformation. When the settlement figures leaked, tens of millions paid directly to him, speculation swirled about what he would do with it. Lavish expansion? Stock buybacks? New ventures? Instead, Sekou stunned the public. At a press conference flanked by civil rights leaders and community organizers, he announced the creation of the Mensa Aviation Equity Initiative, a scholarship and training program for minority youth who aspired to careers in aviation. Pilots, flight attendants, air traffic controllers, engineers, all of them. "We can't rewrite what happened in Seat 2A, he said, his voice clear, steady. "But we can make sure generations from now won't be told they don't belong in the skies. Every dollar of this settlement is going into opportunity, not silence." The announcement lit up the airwaves. Young students posted videos thanking him. Families spoke of the inspiration their children felt, seeing a black CEO turn insult into empowerment. Airlines across the industry faced uncomfortable questions. What are you doing to ensure dignity in your skies? Meanwhile, Karen Wickfield's fall from grace was swift and merciless. Brands severed ties overnight, erasing her face from billboards and product lines. The cosmetics giant she once represented issued a statement: "We do not tolerate discriminatory conduct." Effective immediately, Karen Wickfield is no longer affiliated with our company. Photos of Karen smiling in seat 2A circulated side by side with headlines announcing her disgrace. Commenters flooded her social media accounts, calling her entitlement the spark that burned down Skylux's empire. She locked her accounts, but the damage was irreversible. From champagne to ashes, her privilege had exposed her, and the system that enabled her, for what it was. Sekou's name, meanwhile, became a symbol. He wasn't just the CEO who stood his ground, he was the leader who turned humiliation into reform. Editorials praised his calm resistance, comparing him to giants who had faced discrimination with dignity. But Sekou himself remained focused on what came next. As the noise swirled, as hashtags continued to trend, as interviews flooded in from major networks, Sekou prepared quietly for the moment that mattered most. His keynote speech at the Global Ethics and Technology Conference was scheduled for that evening, the very speech he had been traveling to deliver when Skylux decided his presence wasn't worthy. He stood before the mirror in his office, adjusting his tie, his reflection sharp against the glass. The world was waiting, not just to hear about technology, but to hear what a man who had been publicly demeaned would say about justice, power, and dignity. He picked up his notes, the same pages he had carried onto that flight, the ones he had protected as security walked him down the aisle. Now those words carried more weight than he ever imagined. The driver called up from the lobby. The car was waiting. Sekou slipped the notes into his case, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the elevator. The world had watched him be escorted off a plane. Now it would watch him take the stage. The ballroom lights dimmed as the announcer's voice echoed across the conference hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the keynote speaker, Sekou Mensah." The audience erupted in applause. Many of them had already seen the viral footage. The images of him being escorted from seat 2A burned into their minds. They weren't just expecting a speech about technology anymore. They were waiting for a message about humanity. Sekou stepped onto the stage with the same composure he had carried through every confrontation. No anger, no theatrics, just a steady walk and a calm presence that commanded attention. He adjusted the microphone, set his notes on the podium, and scanned the faces before him. He began softly. 2 days ago, I was removed from an airline seat I had lawfully paid for. I showed my boarding pass. I showed my platinum status. I followed every rule, and yet I was told I did not belong. The room was silent. No coughing, no shuffling, just silence. He continued, his voice rising not in volume, but in gravity. "This is not just about me. It is about every person who has ever been told, in one way or another, that they are less worthy. It is about every traveler who has felt eyes linger on them, every worker who has been passed over, every child who has been told to shrink themselves so someone else can feel taller." He leaned forward, hands resting on the podium. Power means nothing unless it is used to protect the powerless. Influence means nothing unless it is used to amplify the voices of the silenced. And dignity is not for sale. It cannot be bribed, bought, or stripped away by uniformed authority or privileged entitlement. Applause rippled through the hall, swelling into a standing ovation, but Sekou raised a hand and the room stilled again. "I built my company to remove bias from customer interactions. I believed and still believe that technology can be a tool for fairness, but no algorithm can erase prejudice if people refuse to confront it. That responsibility belongs to us, to leaders, to citizens, to human beings who know that fairness should never be conditional." His final words struck like steel wrapped in velvet. "They thought they stripped me of dignity, but dignity was never theirs to take." The room erupted again, this time with thunderous applause that shook the chandeliers overhead. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and hashtags that had begun with outrage now pulsed with admiration. And now, turning from Sekou's story to the audience watching this very video, there's a reason this moment matters. Because injustice doesn't always look like headlines. Sometimes it looks like a seat you're told to give up, a job you're denied, a door that's closed before you even reach it. So let me ask you, Have you ever been treated unfairly because of who you are? Share your story in the comments. Your words matter. Your story matters. And if you believe, as Sekou showed the world, that respect should never depend on skin color, then subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ. Like this video, share it, and let's keep these stories alive until dignity is no longer debated, it's guaranteed.